She couldn't explain it, and that was the hardest part. There was no tragedy, no obvious reason, no single moment she could point to and say that is where it began. Just a heaviness that arrived one morning and never left. A flatness, a distance between herself and everything she used to find beautiful. A doctor called it depression, prescribed an antidepressant. She took it faithfully for 2 years, and she felt a little better some days, but never quite right, never quite herself. Her name was Elena, 36 years old, a secondary school teacher in Manchester, England. And what nobody told Elena, not a doctor, not a therapist, not anyone, was that the conversation happening inside her body was taking place in more places than anyone had thought to look. The brain was part of the story, but it wasn't the only part. What I'm about to tell you is not a metaphor. It is a wellness trend. It is not an alternative theory. It is one of the most significant and most overlooked discoveries in the neuroscience of the last 30 years. And it changes everything we thought we understood about the relationship between the human mind and the human body. Somewhere between 1990s and today, a small group of researchers began to ask a question so simple, so fundamental that it is almost embarrassing it took this long to ask. If mood, thought, and emotion are chemical processes, where exactly are those chemicals made? The answer, when it finally came, stunned them. The first serious clue came from an unexpected direction. Scientists studying the digestive system, not the brain, began noticing something that didn't fill the model. The gut contained neurons, not a few neurons, not trace amount of nerve tissue that can be dismissed. An entire nervous system, more than 500 million neurons, woven into walls of digestive tract, from esophagus to the colon, a neural network so vast, so independent, so sophisticated, the researcher gave it a name that still surprises people when they hear it for the first time. The second brain, not a metaphor, a genuine second neural system, capable of sensing, processing, and responding to the environment, largely independent of the brain above. And the more researchers looked, the stranger it got. There is a nerve, the vagus nerve, that serves as a direct communication line between the gut and the brain. And when scientists mapped the signals traveling along that nerve, they made a discovery that should have changed medicine overnight. Approximately 80% of these signals on the vagus nerve traveled upward, not from the brain down to the gut, as everyone assumed, from the gut up to the brain. The gut was not simply receiving instruction from above, it was sending them. It was in ways science still working to fully understand, helping to run the show. And then came the discovery that changed everything for people like Elena: serotonin. Most people know it as the brain's happiness chemical, the neurotransmitter associated with mood, well-being, and emotional balance. The chemical that most antidepressants are designed to act on. Here is what most people do not know, and what most doctors trained in earlier era of neuroscience were never taught. Approximately 90% of the body's serotonin is not produced in the brain. It is produced in the gut. 90%. Now, here is where the science requires a moment of perception, because this is where the story becomes genuinely fascinating, rather than simply surprising. Gut serotonin does not cross the blood-brain barrier. The serotonin produced in the gut and the serotonin used by the brain are two separate systems, and separated by one of the most selective barriers in human biology. So how does the gut serotonin production influence the brain at all? The answer is the vagus nerve. When the gut releases serotonin, it activates nerve ending along the vagus nerve, sending signals upward into the brainstem, where they interact with the brain's own serotonin-producing neurons, influencing emotional regulation, stress responses, and mood. The gut is not making your brain's serotonin. It is sending signals that help shape the environment in which your brain makes its own. That distinction matters. And it is the distinction that makes the gut-brain connection not just real, but scientifically remarkable. There is also a second pathway, the gut microbiome. The vast ecosystem of bacteria living in your digestive tract, influencing the availability of tryptophan, the essential amino acid your brain needs to produce serotonin. Tryptophan can cross the blood-brain barrier, and the balance of bacteria in your gut appears to influence how much of it is available for the brain to use. Emerging research also suggests a certain bacterial strain can directly stimulate the gut serotonin producing cells, altering the signal sent up the vagus nerve and influencing the brain serotonin system indirectly. This is still an evolving field. Not every mechanism is fully mapped. Not every pathway is completely understood. But what the current evidence consistently shows across animal studies and a growing body of human research is that the state of the gut microbiomes appears to meaningfully influence the brain serotonin environment. Not directly, not by sending its own serotonin across the barrier, but through signaling, through chemical conversation, through a communication network of extraordinary complexity. And this is where it becomes deeply personal for millions of people. Because a disrupted microbiome, one depleted by chronic stress, poor diet, antibiotics, or long-term inflammation may alter the signals traveling up the vagus nerve, affect tryptophan availability, and contribute to disruptions in the brain's own serotonin regulation, not as the sole cause of mood disorders, but as a meaningful, measurable, and often entirely unaddressed factors. Elena's stories sit within this emerging picture. 3 years before her depression began, she had a severe bout of food poisoning that required hospital treatment. 6 months later, a prolonged course of antibiotics for recurrent infection. And then, quietly, gradually, the emotional flatness arrived. Our doctors never connected these events. The gastroenterology team never spoke to the psychiatry team. And nobody, in 3 years of treatment, looked at the gut-brain axis. Let me be precise about something important. Because this is where the science requires care and where the conversation matters most. Antidepressants save lives. For many people, they are not just helpful, they are necessary. The evidence for their effectiveness in moderate to severe depression is real and well established. And nothing in this documentary should be interpreted as suggesting otherwise. But the model of depression as purely a brain chemistry problem, a simple serotonin deficiency correctable by medication alone, is a model that neuroscience has been quietly moving beyond over a decade. The emerging picture is considerably more complex. Depression, anxiety, and mood dysregulation appear to involve not just the brain chemistry, but inflammation, the immune system, the gut microbiome, the vagus nerve, cortisol, sleep architecture, the intricate signaling network connecting the gut to the brain. What this means, practically, for real people, is that treating only the brain while leaving the gut, the immune system, the microbiome entirely unaddressed, be why so many people experience only partial improvement. Not because the medication is wrong, but because the conversation it is trying to correct is happening in more places than anyone realized. Elena found a functional medicine practitioner who ordered a comprehensive gut microbiome analysis. What it shows, after 3 years of unexplained depression, partial response to medication, and a gut history nobody had ever connected to her mental health, was significant dysbiosis, severely reduced population of beneficial bacteria, including lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species, that research has linked to serotonin precursors availability, elevated inflammatory markers in the gut lining, and compromised gut permeability, the same condition we examined in episode 5. 3 years, the answers has been there, in a place nobody thought to look. The science of gut-brain connection is still young, There are questions it hasn't fully answered yet, mechanisms that are still being mapped, treatment protocols that are promising, but not yet standardized in mainstream medicine. But there is enough right now to act on, and the evidence-based steps that support gut-brain health are not complicated, not expensive, not dependent on waiting for medicine to catch up. The first is rebuilding the microbiome. Fermented foods, kefir, sucrose, plain yogurt with live cultures introduce beneficial bacteria, prebiotic fiber, garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus feeds the bacterial species already present. This is not a cure for depression, but it is a meaningful, evidence-supported step toward creating an environment in which the gut-brain conversation can happen more clearly. The second is protecting the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, the great communication highway between gut and brain, responds to specific practices that most people overlook entirely. Slow, deliberate breathing, particularly extended reserve, has been shown to directly stimulate vagal tone. Humming, singing, cold water on the face. These are documented methods of activating parasympathetic nervous system and supporting the gut-brain axis, not wellness trends. Physiology. The third is addressing gut inflammation. Chronic gut inflammation disrupts the gut lining, compromises tight junctions, and appears to interfere with the signaling pathway connecting the gut to the brain. The foods and practices we covered across this series, removing inflammatory triggers, supporting gut wall repair, rebuilding the microbiome, all serve the gut-brain axis directly, not just digestion. Every step you have taken for your gut in this series has been a step for your brain. The fourth is sleep. The gut microbiome has its own circadian rhythm, tied closely to sleep architecture. Disrupted sleep disrupts the microbiome. A disrupted microbiome appears to disrupt sleep. Protecting sleep, consistent timing, darkness, reduced late night eating is one of the most powerful and most underrated interventions available for gut-brain health. And the fifth, perhaps the most important of all, asking different questions. If you are living with mood, anxiety, cognitive or emotional symptoms that haven't responded fully to the treatment you have received, the gut-brain axis may be worth exploring with a practitioner who understands both ends of the conversation, not instead of conventional alongside it. The gut and the brain are not separate systems. They never were. We simply forgot to look at both ends of the conversation. Elena described it carefully because she could learn to be careful with words like better. She said it wasn't like a fog lifting all at once. It was more like the world slowly becoming more saturated, color coming back into things gradually. Until one morning, she looked out the kitchen window at the light coming through the trees, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Curious about the day, about what might happen, about being alive. She still works with her psychiatrist. She still, on some days, needs the support she has been given. But for the first time in 3 years, her treatment is looking at both ends of the conversation. The brain that processes a word and the gut that helps shape the signals our brain receives. The human body is not a collection of separate problems. It is a single, extraordinary complex conversation happening simultaneously in every system, every organ, every cell. And the more we learn to listen to the whole conversation, the closer we get to understand what it means to be well, not just in the absence of disease, but in the fullest, most complete sense of the word. This has been TRINITYMED TV, the hidden science of human health. The more science uncovers about the human body, the clearer one truth becomes. No organ works alone. Every system is part of the same conversation. And on TRINITYMED TV, we keep following the conversation, one mystery at a time. If you enjoy evidence-based health documentaries, subscribe so you don't miss what is next. See you in our next video.